What? Just do it.
Mommy.
Have you heard of tuna?
You ever hear of a ritual killing?
I don't get it.
You know how to face in public like that again and you'll be one.
Are you crazy?
I can be.
You could have taken his head off.
Yeah, but what do you notice?
Can we get something straight?
The guy's a predator and you're his prey.
Really?
Bet.
And how do you know?
When I was his age, I was the guy suing the girls like you. Pretty face, big chip on your shoulder.
I recommend that you stay out of my personal life.
Your parents stay out of your personal life?
They don't know my personal life.
Have they met Twiddlebench?
His name is Bug.
First or last?
First.
What's his last name? Sprague?
You should talk, Buck.
No, no. Don't look at me like that. Don't. That's not fair. Don't you have a favorite doll or something? Why don't we get one of these dolls and put your dad in?
Okay, what's going on? That's enough John Candy fun for one night. How is everybody? I see Kelly, who I was just talking to. Kelly, I hope you're doing well. Telling me about the new job. And Charlie, how are you doing tonight? And Christy. And can anybody name did any of you who were in here early, anybody know what that movie was that I was playing there? I'll leave you to think about that a little bit as we get into the show. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's a little chilly here. And Stephanie, how are you doing tonight? And Nicole, thanks for everybody tuning in. Everybody, Stephanie, man, you know your movies. And Charlene does too. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what I was watching while I was doing my work today. Yes, Kelly, that's right. Uncle Buck, that's the movie I was watching today. While I was doing some work, getting ready, getting Friday's program ready, working on Volume 2, doing some other things. I had that in the DVD player today. I watched that movie, and it reminds me of my high school days. I went to Grove City. When that movie came out, I believe I was a freshman at Grove City. I think that came out in the fall of '89. And I can remember going to the old theater in downtown Grove City to watch that movie. And I can remember falling out of my chair laughing so hard when John Candy tries to take a whiz at those little boys' urinals. I remember like it was yesterday. That's a true story. That's a true story. So I thought that I haven't watched that movie for a while, and I thought that it would be good to put it in the DVD player today. And I've been just going through my collection. I think yesterday I had the Dirty Dozen in, and I was watching The Incredibles at one point within the last 3 or 4 days as well. That's one of my favorite movies as well. So there you go. What I'm wearing tonight, I'm wearing an Innova disc golf shirt. I throw all of their discs when I do play disc golf. Not playing as much these days. A lot going on with Unfound, so I haven't been able to get to play very much. But I am signed up for a tournament in February, so I'm excited about that. I think it's the third weekend in February. Innova Disc Golf, and it's in the camo colors. So we got that going on. And let's see if we got anybody else that has joined in since we started. Let me just check this out for a moment. Let's just see. And Dorothy, I see you there. How are you doing? Glad you could join us tonight. I'm wondering how many of you got to, and Mary, I'm wondering how many, and Greg, I wonder how many of you got to see the TribLive.com story that I worked on with them this past weekend, the disappearance of Amy Pugner. A little bit of a strange case, isn't it? A little bit unusual, and I think that Stephen Huba, who wrote the article, did a really great job. I think he captured the essence of it. I thought that the 30,000, how they highlighted that part of the story in big letters. At least if you saw the print edition, I did post some pictures in the Unfound group. So if you saw those, you know what the article looked like if you don't live in the Pittsburgh area. And it seems to me that there were a lot more details in the printed article than on the website, and that's fine. I get that. That's no problem. But, you know, you're left wondering, was that a real ransom demand, or was Amy working with somebody to try to get that money? You know, $30,000, your average person just can't come up with that amount of money in so quick a time, it seemed, that was wanted in that case. And then, of course, Amy disappeared, and that guy that she was for her boyfriend, whoever he was, John Martin, he's kind of, I wouldn't say, I don't know if he's disappeared. It sounds to me maybe he was in work that was a little transient. So I'm wondering if any of you checked that out and read that article. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. There goes somebody, I don't know if you heard that, somebody just went flying down the street in a very loud car. So, hello, Mary and Greg. Thanks for responding. So I just wonder if how many of you saw the article. I think what's going to happen is we'll be putting out an article at in the last Sunday of every month. That's going to, and I think we already have our case picked out for February, I think. I haven't talked to Stephen about it in depth yet, but I did send him the recording of a phone call that I had with somebody, and I hope maybe that'll be the case. It'll be totally up to him, and I'm sure I'll be talking to him maybe within the next week about that. So I hope you all checked it out, and we'll continue to work on them. And we're going to try to do one a month for all of 2018, and we're going to be doing all Western Pennsylvania cases all around the Pittsburgh area. I don't know how far we're going to get out away from Pittsburgh. That'll be determined by the powers that be at Trib Live, at Trib Total Media. But and my job is to go out and find these people to talk to. So there you go. Hello, Andrea. How are you doing tonight? Thanks for joining in. Just some of the business to get out of the way. First of all, I think that you saw the new shirt I put together. Took some time to do that, to get all those pictures exactly right. I use a program at canva.com to do all of that. Great program. And that's going to be, for now, the flagship shirt. If you're excused for being late, Andrea, don't worry about it. That's going to be the flagship shirt. It's going to have the logo on the front and all the first-year cases on the back. And once again, that's from the beginning of September of 2016 to the end of July 2017. Now you're wondering, well, why did I leave August? Technically, Unfound started in August of 2016. There were just not any episodes out yet. That's when I started making phone calls and everything. So I consider that to be the beginning, even though the first episode didn't come out. So the first year cases go from Suzanne Lyle the whole way around to the end of July this past year of Jennifer Wilkerson, who had disappeared in Lubbock, Texas. Then so when the next shirt comes out, it will go from August of 2017, the whole way to this year, to the end of July 2018. And then we'll have another shirt. And Stephanie, you're back in again. I guess I must have lost you for a moment. So I know a couple of you, and I want to thank Stephanie. You can see her in the comments here. She is the one who suggested that to me. She said, well, how do I pick? How do I pick a shirt? I care about all these people. I care about all these cases. You know, it's just hard for me to make a decision. And I told her, well, you know, I don't want to sell anything without it having to do with the cases that Unfound covers. I don't want to do that. So I thought, well, you know what? I could put a shirt together with the entire first year on it, and we'll see how that goes. I would love to put all the cases on it, but doing a case every week, that's going to get a little difficult. So we're going to do the first year cases, then at some point when the second year is over, and that's going to get here, July is going to be here in no time. Then I'll put a shirt out for the second year cases. That's how I'm going to do it. Stephanie's blushing. That's funny. And Sunny, welcome tonight. And Andrea, yes, you and Stephanie, you're telling me exactly what Stephanie said. You know, it's hard to pick out, and I get that. I understand that. But I think there will be some people, especially family members or friends of the person who disappeared, and people who live in the areas where these disappearances happened, that they may go for, you know, a particular one. Say if somebody who lives in Alaska, you have Aaron Gilbert, maybe some people will pick that one. And I want to leave that as an option for that. And there's going to be some other merchandise coming out, but that is going to be the flagship shirt. That's the one I'm going to be posting the most on. But I want you to all to know that there are individual shirts. As you've already seen, I showed you the Jesse Foster shirt. Those are all available too if you go to unfound-podcast.myshopify.com. I know it's a humongous, it's right here. There it is, unfoundpodcast.myshopify.com. I wish it was shorter than that, but that's just what it is. So it didn't take me too long to put those pictures together. I have them, and I kind of know what I'm doing with it, but I thought that I thought that was a great idea. So I appreciate Stephanie giving me that idea. Hello, Sunny and Stan. Good to I think Stan, I always see you liking my comments about music. Maybe you and I have some similar tastes in music. I quote some maybe some AC/DC, and I think I quote some Megadeth recently. I know. And a couple other bands, but my impression is that when I post something about like a heavy metal lyric or something, for sure, there you go. See, I remember this stuff. I'm glad I could do that. Thank you. Thank you. Love to talk music with you sometime. So there we go. We got the shirts, Unfound. Once again, Unfound, right there, unfound-podcast.myshopify.com will take you to where the T-shirts are. Of course, the playing cards, I'm sitting here with them right now. Got the cards right here. I always know there's Peggy and Patty McDaniel, daughters of my good friend Joyce Rivatuzo. Linda K. Carroll, of course, her sister Cheryl Wheeler was on with me not so long ago. Seems like yesterday. We have Crystal Morrison. I was just talking to her sister Michelle a few days ago. Her sister happens to work for Krispy Kreme, so we had a little funny conversation about that. I keep in contact with most of the guests. If those guests want to talk to me, I'm always ready to talk to them. I try to check in with them, and you know, I enjoy reconnecting with them and helping them in any way that I can. And I hope to one of these days meet all of them. Excuse me. You can find them playing cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/Unfound Podcast. And then Volume 2 is just about done. Speaking of which, there goes the remote. Unfound, Volume 1 in ebook and print edition. And Volume 2 is just about done. In fact, it will be done by the time the episode comes out on Friday, and you'll hear me talking about that. And I will be linking to that, and you'll be able to buy it. And some of you will be getting it for free. Of course, all of the guests that took part for volume 2 are going to get their books for free, as this happened with volume 1. Well, I'll be making that happen. So please be looking for that as well. Let's see if we got any other people that I'm missing so far in the comments section. I don't think so. Not missing anybody as of yet. Okay. Please, if you have any questions for me tonight about anything, about music, about writing, about movies, about the show, of course, please do, because I didn't come to this episode, this show with any pre-planned questions for tonight. I got some news to talk about, but if you have any questions, please fire away. I'm ready. I'm absolutely ready for them. So we got the books, Amazon.com. Just do a search for Denzel and Unfound. You'll find volume 1, and by Friday you'll find volume 2 as well, in both print and ebook form. Going to be same price as volume 1. And what else? Oh, we got Patreon and PayPal. Let's see if I can do that. Patreon, all you Patreon supporters, I cannot thank you enough. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, right there. And then if you only have PayPal, that's fine too. You can go to PayPal and look for either unfoundpodcast@gmail.com or edwarddenzel@reagan.com. I'd prefer you use the unfoundpodcast@gmail.com one, though, to be honest. But that's up to you. So there you go. Got the business stuff out of the way. Once again, any questions for anybody tonight? Any questions, any concerns, any questions about what's going on with the show? I try to keep everybody dated. That's why I do the Unfound News every week. Before I get into our first news article, which I would say, is fairly serious, and it's going to, I think it's going to probably generate some discussion. If you don't know, I had posted this when it happened, and in fact, it happened right after last week's show. Is there any guests I haven't spoke? Stephanie, the answer is yes, but I don't want to. I'm not going to say who those guests were. And I'm not taking it personally. Okay, the answer is yes, but I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to put anybody's name on the record. I don't think they have any. I don't think it's personally anything against me or anything like that. That's just how some people handle it. But the answer is yes. If you don't know, Teresa Butler, that was a case we covered approximately almost exactly a year ago. Her husband committed suicide last Wednesday night. Now, we were so caught up in talking about Jennifer Kesse last week, and for good reasons. That was the anniversary of her disappearance. Well, it was the anniversary of Teresa Butler's disappearance. It's the same day, January 24th, although I think it's different years. But January 24th is the same day that both of those women disappeared. And Teresa Butler's husband, Dale, committed suicide on the anniversary of her disappearance. So now their two sons, the sons that were home when Teresa disappeared that night, they now don't have a mother or a father. It's terrible. And I was just shocked. Amy Lacey, who was the guest for that episode, who I've remained in contact very well since she was on the program. She was the one who let me know, and then she posted something, I think even in the group. She sent me something and then posted in the group about it. And so he committed suicide. And, it's been a week now, and I said there's going to be a time, to talk about this. And I don't know if the time is right yet. I don't know what is appropriate at this point. But I imagine that, when somebody close to somebody somebody who disappeared, somebody close to them that commits suicide, you just don't know which way to lean. Does that mean, that, because we talked about it during the episode with Amy Lacey, is that, he didn't do many interviews or media appearances or anything like that. after she disappeared. And in fact, the one he did do was only maybe 2 months after we covered that disappearance on Unfound. I don't know if he felt he had to because of the episode. I don't know if he even knew the episode was done. I have no idea. So, but he wasn't a guy who came out and did a lot. On the other hand, we know of a lot of course, we have most family members on this show. We know a lot of family members do a lot. Dale was a different type of guy. And that actually caused suspicion to be put upon him. You know, did he have something to do with her disappearance? Now, allegedly, he had an alibi at work, being in a totally different state, about an hour and a half away. Did he commit suicide over grief, or did he commit suicide over guilt? And we just don't know. And I want to have a discussion with everybody at the appropriate time. I just don't know if this is the time to do it. It's only been a week. But if you didn't know, her husband committed suicide a week ago tonight. I'm not sure if he hung himself or he shot himself. I don't remember. But he committed suicide. There's no conspiracy or, to my knowledge, anything like. It's pretty clear cut that he committed suicide. So there's that bit of news. Hello, Joyce. Joyce, I just before you tuned in, I had your daughter's pictures up on the screen from the cards, the playing cards. So you missed that. You can go back and I guess watch it after we're done recording here. But good to see you tonight, Joyce. But Stephanie asked before, yes. Are there any guests you've never spoken with again? The answer is yes, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Dorothy asked, can you do a show with grief expert or someone who can help families deal with the emotional side of having a missing family member? There are a few of having a rough time going through stuff right now. Sure, I can do that. In fact, that has crossed my mind. I would love to have some sort of psychiatrist on to ask a whole bunch of different things. You know, once again, we used to have these Monday episodes. I just haven't had time. That would be something for that special Monday episode, you know, stuff that I used to do. I want to do it. I just don't have any time. Between the books and working, of course, with Trib Total Media now and doing shirts and some of these things. Jill, you're a therapist. Maybe we can line something up then. If you are a therapist, you know, maybe we could get together a bit. You know, what I would like to do if I had somebody like that on, and maybe Jill, you can think about this. I would want to talk about the grief, the trauma that these people suffer. Absolutely, I want to talk about that. But as I've also stated, I think this started coming up with like Shane Fell's case. He, he wrecked his car right beside the Mississippi River, and of course we know about all these mostly young men who end up in rivers. I would like to talk to somebody who might know something about the effects of alcohol on the mind, and is there something within that that draws people to water? I'm totally serious about this. The effects of alcohol on the brain in relationship to how people perceive their surroundings. I have to say, I've never been drunk. I don't drink alcohol. It's not a religious thing. I've just never gotten into it. Even going back to college, I was the designated driver for all my friends who like to get liquored up, and I'd watch out for them. I know I'm a goody two-shoes, I guess. But I've never gotten into that. So I don't know what it's like to have a buzz. I don't know what it's like to be drunk. And a lot of people do, but I want to look at it from more of the medical, clinical, therapist side, the psychoanalysis side, not just, what it feels like to be drunk. Because I think that needs to start being looked at. If people are going to talk about smiley face killers, well, maybe we just need to talk about the science of being drunk in water and anything like that. So, Jill, if you're listening, maybe we could talk about that. If you maybe don't feel comfortable with that particular topic, maybe you know somebody who does. That is something I would definitely like to do for a Monday special show. I just haven't had time to put it together. Just only so many hours in a day. So that would be very, very interesting. Maybe we could get into the psychology of serial killers too, or people who cause people to disappear, in contrast to people who murder people and just leave the body, out in the open. That might be interesting too. So there you go. So Joyce has joined. Rachel, welcome. Dee Dee, I thought you'd probably be tuning in eventually. Stephanie, Abnormal Psychology. And there's Cheryl. Pleasure to see you tonight. Thank you for joining. We were just talking about a special episode that I'd like to do, maybe with somebody, a psychiatrist or a therapist, about grief and trauma. But I'd like to also talk to that type of person, somebody in that field, about some other aspects concerning disappearances and some of the things that we tend to run into quite a bit in cases. So, Dorothy, thank you for asking me that question. It gives me an opportunity to talk about something I've been meaning to mention. It's just that just don't have a lot of time. I want to have some other podcast hosts. I've talked to a couple other podcast hosts about doing some special Monday episodes. Once again, just don't have the time. I want to do it. It's on the list. That's all I can tell you. So there, I already talked about Teresa Butler's husband committing suicide a week ago. I also want to talk about this Kitty Cat West. And I don't want to talk about it simply because sex is involved, or, you know, she was some sort of internet model, nudity and all those things, which, you know, I know gets viewers and gets a lot of clicks and everything else. I want to talk about it from the standpoint of privacy. That if you don't know what this story is, she was an internet model from Alabama, a woman in her 30s or maybe early 40s. I know she was younger than I am, but I don't think by a lot. But she had a business going on. Yeah, Dana, mine says serial killers would be really interesting. I agree with you. And Dana, I didn't welcome you to the show. Dana, my good disc golf friend right here in Pinellas County. Or no, you live over in Hillsborough, don't you? I forget. Anyway, disc golfing friend Dana Smith. Welcome. But Kitty Cat West, her real name was Catherine West, was an internet model, making money doing that, doing videos, had a private website, all of that. She was discovered murdered, I don't think quite a week ago. I think maybe Friday. And, you know, it seems to me that, and I stated in the group that, you know, her murder reminds me of whatever went on with Sherry Papini out in California, where she was kidnapped for 3 weeks, and then by two women, allegedly, and then she escaped, allegedly, and now she's back with her family. And I said, you know, Catherine West's case reminds me of Sherry Papini's. And the reason I said that is I just see similarities. And it does. One of the things has to do with their looks. To me, as a man, as a straight guy, as a heterosexual man, I look at Sherry Papini, and there's a reason that when it happened, people thought that she got sex trafficked. She's an attractive woman. All right, she is older than she looks. And you know, I just wonder if, you know, there are things going on behind the scenes with some people that, once again, we don't deserve to know about it. It's their own private lives. The kind of marriages that people want to have is totally up to them. But if these people in their circles, they run into some people who seem a little dangerous, I guess it's going to be mainly men, then they have a duty, they have a responsibility to telling somebody in law enforcement or somebody about it. And my perception, I've never been involved in anything like this, but I will be more than honest in saying I had friends who were into this kind of lifestyle stuff when I lived in Las Vegas. I'll be just honest about that. You know, you do hear some weird things that go on. And you just wonder if sometimes this privacy stuff, as much as I believe in people's rights and everything, the privacy goes too far. And, you know, that's what I wondered about Sherry Papini's case. Does something go on where, you know, she had something going on in the side that, you know, I brought up in the group, what was her name? Susie Favor. I forget her full name. Susie Favor Hamilton. There you go. Who was a track star in the United States, went to the Olympics, but she ended up being a glamorous. It's not really glamour. It's not. It's just, it's a little sad, but high cost prostitute in Las Vegas. And this has struck me when it comes to Sherry Papini. Did she, in Susie Favor Hamilton's case, her husband knew what she was doing and they continued to be married. I'm just wondering if that was going on here. And that, did she get kidnapped and then escape? Did she go out to meet some guy and he kidnapped her and then she escaped? And the reason that women are never been caught or anything like that, no story before Sherry disappeared or after it is even close to that, are those the real facts? Or is she lying about what happened to protect both her reputation and, of course, the guy who did this, of course, he's not going to come forward because he might have committed a crime. So everybody just keeps their mouth shut. I have to admit that I've thought about that. I don't know anything more about the case than you do. So when Kitty Cat West has that happen to her, she's out there and they have this video of her being in this liquor store who I think is her husband, and they're kind of fooling around. She seems all happy and everything. And then she ends up dead like 12 hours later. Personally, it's been like 5 days since her body was discovered. If her husband did it, I think we would know by now. I think that would be pretty easy for the police to figure out. But on the other hand, what I think was going on there was probably she just wasn't an internet model. She was probably doing some prostitution on the side, meeting guys, and maybe she just met the wrong guy. And once again, I come back to, are these types of people, women, meeting these kinds of guys who would do something like that and keeping it quiet? They run into somebody and he's kind of rough this, rough that. Maybe they have a suspicion he might have, hurt a woman before, but they keep it quiet because they're protecting what they do because they want to keep up appearances. It's something that goes through my mind a lot. Once again, I don't know anything more than any of you do. So I wanted to bring that out into the open to expound what makes me, there's nothing, I guess, suspicious. There's only, in Kitty Cat West's case, of course, she's dead, unfortunately. But I'm guessing that we're going to find out that she was probably more than just an internet model. And the way that Sherry Papini seemed to take care of herself and the way that all went down, and there's no case like Sherry Papini's before that or after that. 2 women attacking a jogger, a stranger, taking her somewhere, holding her up for 3 weeks. Of course, it can't be sex trafficking because, to our knowledge, no sex took place. They did his interview with People magazine. No mention of sex at all. So it couldn't have been sex trafficking. What was it? Did these 2 women do it for fun? I doubt that. If it was 2 men, I could believe it. But 2 women, I have to say my spidey sense is going off. And I'm guessing that what happened in Sherry Papini's case is probably what happened in Catherine West's case, except Catherine West unfortunately ended up dead, and Sherry Papini luckily got out of it, escaped. Maybe the guy let her go. I don't know. So that's a case we're going to continue to talk about until they're solved, and I hope California police can get that done. Once again, looking for questions. Anybody more questions as we go into this? I just have one more story, and then we're going to be talking about this week's case, and that is the disappearance of Marina Boelter, New Year's Eve 2014. Not a case that's very well known. It wasn't on the Charlie Project, but that's the case, and I interviewed her mother, Tressie Palmer, for this Friday's episode. One more very weird story from the realm of true crime. And that was the story I posted today from Hawaii about these twin sisters who were yoga instructors. It seems they have a little bit of a criminal history, a little bit of kind of snake oil salesman or something like that. But they were in here, they were somewhere, then they were in Utah, and they got run out of there. Well, they found their way to Hawaii. Well, these two got in a fight while they were in a car, went over a cliff. Alexandria, the one twin, lived. Anastasia, her twin sister, died. While they were fighting, other people driving by them saw them, the two fighting while they were going down the road, and that's how the crash happened. Well, Alexandra is on trial now, and any case in which you believe suicide is likely, Jill, do you mean unfound cases? Just to clarify, please clarify that, and I think I'll try to give that an answer if I honestly can. If I think it's appropriate. So Alexandria is on trial for, I think, for vehicular manslaughter, something like that. But the creepy part about all of this is after this wreck happened and Anastasia was dead, Alexandria dressed up in the same clothes as her sister and made a move on Anastasia's boyfriend. That's a crazy family. So you never know what you're going to run into in some of these cases. I don't know what the trial has to do. I guess it's not murder or anything like that, because the SUV went over the cliff, and Alexandria and Anastasia were both in it. And it just happened to be that Alexandria lived, she was driving, and Anastasia died. So, and once again, Alexandra then posed as Anastasia and tried to make the moves on her dead sister's boyfriend. Interesting. Hello, Jessica. Welcome to Nate. How are you doing? How's everything going on out in Arizona? I was just watching something from Arizona. I got a big golf tournament in Phoenix this weekend. My favorite golfer, Phil Mickelson, is there. So I will be trying to catch as much of that as I can in the Phoenix area. So I'll be watching Arizona over the next 4 days. Any case in which you believe suicide is likely, and then any unfound or not, whatever is more appropriate. Joe, I have to tell you, I don't think that it would be appropriate for me to talk about any of the cases that I believe might be a suicide with unfound. I just don't believe that. Are there any prominent cases that I think could be suicide? Well, let's just pick out maybe some of the major ones, because once again, I don't feel appropriate talking about that topic when it's cases that I've covered. All right, that would be something that I would discuss with the guest, with the family. I would have to get some sort of approval before I did that. I don't mind talking about, did this person or that person cause the person to disappear? But when we start getting to the point of saying, somebody committed suicide, of course, suicide has come up in some cases, but I just don't think it would be appropriate. But whatever is more appropriate, unfound or not, some people think Mara Murray committed suicide. I think that's a possibility. I don't think she's with us anymore. I don't think she ran off to Canada like, what's his name? James Renner says. I never believed that. I believe that she took off with as much stuff as she could and took off into the woods and died due to the elements, and she just hasn't been found in the woods. That's what I believe. Is that suicide? I guess not. But I wouldn't say that anybody particularly killed her either. It's somewhere in between. There's Brian Schaefer from, what happened to him? Is it possible that he had issues? He had, his mother die, it's other things going on. And, did he get depressed and somehow did he get out of that ugly tuna and without being seen? And did he go, and was he drunk, and did he go into some river in Columbus? Possible. I'm not sure I believe that, but I think it's a possibility. What are some other prominent cases? Maybe there's the other case. Oh man, I can't think of his name right now. What's the case where the guy ran out of gas on the side of the road, made a call to 911, and people think that there's somebody in the background? What case is that? I can't think of it off the top. His name was Brian too. It wasn't Brian Schaefer. Brian somebody. Was that in Texas or Oklahoma? I just can't think of it. That's another one where I don't think any foul play is involved. And I think that, I'm not saying he committed suicide, but I don't believe that he died by somebody else's hand either. I think that's another case. Brian Lawson, thank you, Andrea. Brandon Lawson, thank you, both of you. Thank you, Andrea and Stephanie. Brandon Lawson. That's another one where people think that, somebody did something to him, whereas I lean toward, I think he died. I think he ran off, and I think he lost his mind. I think he was on something and lost his mind. Once again, those aren't suicides, Jill, but I think there are plenty of cases out there where I think the people aren't with us anymore, and it's not because of some sort of manslaughter or murder or suspicious activity. I think a lot of these disappearances are people who ran off and died due to the elements. Maybe they fell off a cliff. Maybe they got into the river, fell down a mine shaft. All sorts of possibilities. But I would really have to think it's some disappearances. And I think, Jill, to be honest with you, now that I'm really thinking about unfound cases, I think that if you were to look at some of the cases we've covered within maybe the last 4 months, we talk about suicide. We talked about, now I don't know what happened, and I'm not going to tell you what I believe, but we talked about suicide in Patrick Beaver's case. We talked about suicide in Bill Underhill's case. Just a couple examples. Once again, I'm not saying that happened. But we always have to leave that as a possibility. But I'm inclined to believe that a high majority of the cases that Unfound has covered, that they are murders. That's what I believe. In some cases, we kind of know who. In some cases, we don't know who. Cheryl Burrow. Cheryl, have you done a podcast on Jesse Ross? Well, that's a very complex answer. The technical answer is yes. The general answer is no. And what I mean by that is I did another podcast. I was part of another podcast before I started Unfound. And on that podcast, myself and my co-host did cover his disappearance in Chicago. Yes, we did. We did not do interviews. It's not like Unfound. That show was nothing like this one. We did not interview anybody in his family. We didn't interview anybody. We just went through the facts. Kind of what we did was what most other true crime podcasts do. They go out and find the information and put it all together and then present it. That's what we did. Of course, that's not what we do on Unfound now. But have you done a podcast? So the answer is yes, Cheryl. And I will tell you, my inclination is I believe that he went into the river in Chicago. That's my belief. I believe that not because he was suicide or anything else, but once again, we get back to something we were talking about, earlier in this show. There's something about people getting drunk and then ending up in water. There just is. I lived in Las Vegas for 13 and a half years. It seemed there was a drowning at Lake Mead every week of some drunk boater, somebody going swimming who shouldn't be. And in Jesse Ross's case, I think it's been established that he did have a couple beers to drink, wasn't a very heavy guy, probably could get drunk very quickly, maybe realized that he was drunk during that United Nations mock trial or whatever they were doing, whatever they call that, that they were having that night. And the reason he was drunk is because that was a surprise meeting that they had that it got called to. I think he took that break as an opportunity to go outside in the cold Chicago weather to kind of like liven up, let the cold hair hit his face, maybe go a little jog around the block or something like that down by the river. And I think that instead of getting less drunk, I believe he got more drunk. And that's what I think happens in a lot of these cases with people who fall into the water, is that When they decide they're going to go down by the water, they're not that drunk. But by the time that alcohol really gets in their system, they're really drunk, and that's why they end up in there. That's what I think happened in Jesse Ross's case. So I appreciate you asking me that question, and that was the conclusion that we came to on the podcast that I used to do. The podcast, of course, that I never name anymore, and the host who I never name anymore. So we went through the news, and I want to talk to you now. Once again, any questions? I'm going to go into the disappearance this week. The disappearance of Marina Boelter. She was 18 years old. She's from Bloomfield, Indiana. She disappeared on New Year's Eve, 2014. Unlike the last couple of cases, maybe the cases that kind of started off this year with Aaron Barnard and Jeremy Burt, where we had, maybe one or two suspects. Of course, last week with Tamala Nikki Wells, we have her boyfriend Ricky Tennant, who is a very, very good suspect in her disappearance. This week, we have about 4 possible, what I would call persons of interest, suspects, and at least 3 of them are not connected to each other at all. So you're going to be challenged this week. You, the listener, they're going to be very, very challenged. The general facts is she went to work on New Year's Eve at the IGA in Bloomfield, Indiana. She got a ride home with a customer. She didn't have a car. She got a ride home to her apartment. She was living on her own, and she was never seen again. The guy came forward or gave her a ride home, came forward after about 3 weeks. He did not come forward right away. 3 weeks later, he came forward to say that, yes, I drove her home, but I dropped her off at her block, and I saw her walk down the street, and that was that. But he is still considered to be a person of interest. The weird part is that at the same time as she was getting into the car, Marina's ex-boyfriend, who happened to just be in the parking lot, saw her get into the car with this guy. So we're not sure if maybe that made him jealous. So he is a suspect. But as you will find out, all of you who get to know this because you're watching this live show, Marina's ex-boyfriend, DJ, who saw her get into the car that night, he died 6 weeks later in a fatal stabbing. 6 weeks later. So he went into some guy's house. They got into a fight. He got stabbed. So he's dead. So we have this guy who drove her home who could be a suspect in her disappearance. We have the ex-boyfriend who might have been jealous and seeing her get in. Oh, the other part, in that building that she was living, there was a murderer / sex offender who had just gotten out of jail a couple years before that. He had been in jail since the 1970s, was let out, I think, in about 2012. He was living right in the same building as Marina was. So he's a suspect. On top of that, Marina was dating a married man, and we get into that with her mother and how that all happened. He's the suspect, of course. Marina was supposed to be going to his house for a party that night. She didn't show up. He allegedly tried calling her, going to look for her, but she was dating a married man. He was well into his 30s, if not his 40s. In fact, older, in his 40s. And she was 18. So we got a story behind that. There's a whole story behind that Tressy's going to tell you all about. So we got that possible suspect. And then finally, we even have the suspect that it possibly could be that Marina's own sister might have had something to do with her disappearance. And we talk about that as well. So lots and lots of suspects in this case. I have to be honest that I'm a little surprised that the case isn't better known. And we're going to do everything we can to make it known. And Tressy, Marina's mother, did a great job on the interview. I edit it today. I looked at it. She did a great job listening to it. And I think this a very, what happened after she got into the car with that guy is going to be the question. Because it ended up her apartment. They went to her apartment. Nothing was out of place. There was no signs of violence. Nothing like that. But it is believed that she did get to her apartment. So we just don't know. So that is the case for this week. The disappearance of Marina Boelter. She disappeared on New Year's Eve, 2014. So this is a case that's just over 3 years old. So it's very fresh. All these people are still around. I think there's a lot of things that can still be done in this case. And I will be interested to hear all of your opinions on who are you going to pick out of all these people who might have had something to do with their disappearance. Any more questions tonight? Anything we need to cover? Anything I missed? Any questions that I missed? I'm looking for anything from anybody before we finish tonight off. Anything, anybody, anywhere? Just to go back through everything, we started out talking about the TribLive.com article, the disappearance of Amy Pugner. Was very happy to make that happen for them. Got in contact with her sister, Jonna, who then did the interview with some of her other family members, meeting with Stephen Huba. That article came out this past Sunday. What was that, January 28th? I hope you'll check it out if you haven't already. Talked about the new shirts that are now posted. You can buy one at Unfound-podcast. Let me see if I can find it. Unfoundpodcast.myshopify.com. There you go. Talked about those. Talked about the books. Volume 2 is going to be out by Friday, so you can check that out. We talked about the playing cards. We talked about patreon.com/unfoundpodcast. We talked about Teresa Butler's husband who committed suicide a week ago. We talked about Kitty Cat West and how I see a similarity between what happened there and what happened, I believe, with Sherry Papini, even though Sherry tells a different story. We talked about the yoga teacher who posed as her dead twin sister to make moves on the dead sister's boyfriend. Went all over the place tonight. And then finally, we talked about the disappearance of Marina Boelter. That's going to be this Friday's episode. But I thank you all for tuning in tonight. The show is over. This is my favorite time of the week. Thanks for all the questions. Thank you for setting me straight on Brandon Lawson. Thank you for putting back in my mind. I got to talk to maybe I'll talk to Jill if she's interested, and maybe some other people who know a little bit about all of these, the psychology of all of this with true crime and drunks and water and everything. That puts that back in my mind. I thank you for that. I'm signing off. Thank you for watching, and you've been watching the Unfound Podcast Facebook Live show. Favorite time of the week for me. Thank you. Good night.